6 more years for the man in the building behind us. Hello, everyone. I'm François Picard. Welcome to Moscow for a special edition of the France 24 debate. Over the coming hour, we're going to be looking at the challenges that Vladimir Putin faces for what is theoretically his last 6-year term in office. Vladimir Putin has been in power since for 18 years, and we're going to be looking at the domestic challenges, what Russia's place on the world stage is going forward. First, though, as we say, 18 years. 18 years means that some of the people who voted in Sunday's election, where he garnered 3/4 of the vote, they are, for the first time, were able to cast a ballot themselves. Their aspirations differ. Most, but not all, voted for Putin. It's a report by our correspondents Elena Volichin and Thomas Lowe.
Alexander will be 18 in 2 months' time. He's a member of an extracurricular patriotic military club which links sport with military training.
From our childhoods, they instill us with patriotism, a love for our country and our army.
This kind of patriotic military education is a priority for the Russian state.
In the 1990s, when the army was in tatters, everyone tried to avoid military service. Now the army is strong again, and that's thanks to our leader, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin.
After his studies, Alexander wants to be an officer in the secret services.
I'm a patriot. If you want peace, get ready to wage war.
Asiya is 18 years old. She joined the team of opposition politician Alexei Navalny.
I was born in January in the year 2000. Vladimir Putin has been in power all my life.
Asiya has taken German lessons since she was a child. She's planning to go to Germany to study.
First of all, I think Germany is more developed than Russia. And there's the studies as well. Universities free over there. Here, things are going badly. You have to be a top student to get your education for free. Otherwise, a year costs 500,000 rubles or 7,000 euros at the good universities.
Asiya wants to be a political scientist.
Afterwards, I want to come back to Russia because this is my country and I have to change things here.
Imagine your model is tired after a fight.
Sophia is 19. She studies at the Graduate School of Art in the city she was born in. Politics isn't really her cup of tea.
My brain switches off as soon as people start talking politics.
But she still believes Vladimir Putin is the only one who can prevent war breaking out.
At least we have stability. There are no catastrophes, no wars, and no major crises. I thank him for that.
It's a view shared by most Russians, regardless of both age and wealth.
And with us right now is Daria Krolova. Daria, 28 years old. Thank you for being with us here on France 24.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here with you.
But before I ask you about yourself, you voted on Sunday?
Sure, I did.
And who did you vote for?
It's a secret. No, of course no. I voted for Putin.
Okay, well, I'll ask you about that in a moment. First, let's talk about you. You're 28 years old, psychology student. You started a career in public relations, and you've switched.
Yes, it's true. The first education of me is PR, public relations, and now I'm finishing my second higher education connected with psychology. So I'm beginning in this sphere, but would like to try, you know.
All right, so you're one of that younger generation that we saw in that report, and What's your reaction? We heard that one student saying, when people start talking politics, my brain switches off. What's it like with your friends? Is it something you talk about much?
No, actually not so much. But in my opinion, we should all have some kind of political position because it's all about the future of our country. So I don't think we have such a right to switch off our brains. We should, of course, have position.
So let's cut to the chase. Why did you vote for Putin?
In my opinion, he is checked by time. The best way to check someone is to have some time with this person, and we had him as a leader 18 years, and we had a chance to see that he provides us with a specific level of stability, progress. He's pretty classic and predictable in his worldview, and I would say he has a pretty patriotic position. It's important,
That stability, that's the big factor?
Yes, sure, it's a big factor, I think. And plus, in my opinion, stability, it's everything. Of course, maybe we need some changes, but as we see, his percentage is so high that we see that people are not ready for these changes. So maybe for everything there is its season. So we should wait maybe some time. In my opinion, we checked him as the leader, and we should now keep him because he provides us some secured and stable life, I would say. I'm pleased with what we have, For these 18 years, I watched his being leader. I would say that the level of life is really better than it was before.
And that standard of living statistics prove it undoubtedly has gone up 15% during those 18 years. Of course, it's stalled ever since the last couple of years with the price of oil dropping, with the sanctions affecting the ruble. When you talked about there are some changes that are needed, what kind of changes?
What kind of changes? I think actually now we have more opportunities for higher education. I would say to get job, it's not such a big challenge for young people as well. So there are a lot of opportunities to be on practice somewhere you would like to work in some spheres, yes? So I'm by myself now in the new sphere for me, and I see how it is possible to get some practice, to get, some development. So it's actually really much better than it was before, I would say.
Much better than it was. How do you get informed? Like, how do you find, where do you go to search for news?
Actually news, I do not watch a lot news on TV. In my opinion, I don't know if it's censored or no. I do prefer to watch the internet, to surf the internet. Now we really have no borders watching the internet news, and actually we have a chance as well to watch how people live in other countries. And in my opinion, the political systems of other countries are, I would not say we would like to have it. So the political system we have here, for me, it's better than anything else in the world. So here it is.
So you have this ability to discern, to look, to see what the other systems are. You don't go for just one source of news, because the stereotype we have is that the state media apparatus is a big public relations machine. You get your news sources from various places.
Of course, I think that it's a tool to influence somehow the population. Of course, yes, I mean informational tool. But from another point of view, still we have figures. What I heard? I'm afraid not to be right, but still that now the level of youth unemployment is about 15%, which is really not so much, and it's great because before, I don't remember the figures before, but I know it's less than it was at the beginning of his period when he was the leader, I mean Putin. So I think it's a great change, and we should respect what he has done, in my opinion.
Daria Kroleva, you're an aspiring cadre who's in a field like psychology. A lot of the people in Moscow who are in your age group, they say they dream of going abroad. And we saw in that report that one woman who dreams of going to Germany and then coming back. Do you think those people, once they go abroad, they do come back? Do you see that?
You know, actually, yes. I hear a lot from my peers as well that there is such a wish to leave the country sometimes. Not everyone has this wish. But in my opinion, you know, there is an interesting fact that wherever we go, we take us with ourselves. And I think if you work hard, if you are good in what you do, in what you study, in the sphere you work, you would get the opportunities to develop yourself. It's not about Russian system, especially not political system. It's more about maybe those who think that life there abroad is much better, but it's not true. Actually, the girl who was speaking about Asa, yes, her name is, who was speaking about the idea to go to study in Germany, she said that in Russia, in good university, it costs about $500,000, yes, which represents €7,000 per all the period to study, yes, there. I mean, in Russia. But it's not true, you know, it's not true. Of course, you have to be really good student to get a free place.
To get a scholarship.
Yes, yeah. But from another point of view, you can easily find a good university for less expensive price. So it just depends on your wish to study and your the right or not right sphere which you chose to be good at, you know, like this.
And so in your view, the aspirations of the Russians can be met. One other question for you. Are you finding a generation gap? Some people are talking about us. The older generation, of course, doesn't get its news from the internet, doesn't look as much at what's going on abroad. Do you sometimes sense a growing divide between younger and older people?
I do think, of course, that there is a big difference in how we judge the political sphere as well, the political life. But I don't think that there is a big generation gap between the generation before me and my generation. I mean, in position regarding Putin, because 18 years is pretty a lot, you know, and it is a lot for those as well who are now more than 40, 50, whom you say maybe they are getting information from another source, like more TV, more even news.
Or simply that they remember the Soviet era, they remember the 1990s under Yeltsin.
Yes, it's true. You know, maybe you're right in the fact that there could be different reason why we are for Putin, most of us. They maybe have such a reason that they do not know how to use their freedom because they did not use to freedom. After the fall of the Soviet Union, really not so much time passed. But we, as a new generation, we are already judged from another point of view. We are ready to be free, but we see that there is no need of freedom if we have the leader who is checked by time.
Daria, many thanks and good luck with your studies.
Thank you.
All right. So we're talking about the generation gap being one of the big issues. Another issue facing Russians today is whether or not you live in a big and beautiful city like the one behind us here, or whether you're in the outer regions. That geographical gap, you might call it, in this huge country with its 10 time zones, is felt just as much today as it was when the Soviet Union fell. It's a report by Thomas Lowe.
Rzhev, a small town 200 kilometers to the west of Moscow. Last year, people living in this building tried to reach Vladimir Putin during his Direct Line TV broadcast.
The building is cracked from top to bottom. There's the crack. It goes straight up, all the way to the top. The building's at risk of falling down.
Sergei and his neighbours have the right to be rehoused because of their building's poor state. But the authorities provide solutions which leave much to be desired.
The council offered me an apartment. This is it. That's what they call a balcony, apparently.
No problems are solved in our country unless the president gets involved. That's it. There's no other way to get things done. So many people suffer and nobody sees or hears them.
Unfortunately for them, Vladimir Putin didn't hear them either. Because last year, 2,600,000 people hoped their problems would be dealt with during the 4-hour TV show. In 2016, however, an SMS sent from this region had its 6 seconds of airtime.
Help us save our cultural center. There's no money for it in the budget. We have to find out where this is.
It can be found at the end of this battered road. This is Nelidova's central square and its crumbling cultural centre.
I just feel terrible looking at it because the whole town's cultural life was concentrated here.
Lyubov wrote the SMS to Vladimir Putin. A little shop is just 100 or so meters from the center.
The governor came and promised to get the work done in 2 years. Everyone tries to get through to the direct line with Vladimir Putin. It's become a habit, because at least things get done when people speak with the president. But these complaints and the help that comes from them are isolated cases. We ordinary people don't want to receive help on an exceptional basis. We want to live better in our country.
Now retired, Lyubov has to work 7 days a week to get by.
How can we survive on a pension of just 8,400 rubles a month? The people have lost all hope.
Faced with their daily problems, there is, once a year, just one hope for millions of Russians: that Vladimir Putin will make a miracle happen.
Welcome back to Moscow, just off of Red Square. We're now in the company of sociologist Denis Volkov with the Levada Center. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Hello.
You've co-published a report on what kind of change people want, and coming out of that report, before I ask you about what the survey that you did with the Levada Center, which is one of the preeminent polling institutes in this country, just when you hear people saying, I need to get through to Vladimir Putin to get stuff done here out in the outer regions, does that mean a drift towards one-man rule?
Well, maybe, but because I think it's kind of a mirror of situation when people understand that the things are not done if Putin is not involved. So, but as his rating is high, really high, and after the annexation of Crimea, which was understood here as that Russia is great again, that we are respected in the world, and so as the ratings went up, people are now saying that yes, problems are big, a lot of problems.
And that was fascinating in your report, because you talk about change, but change for Russians in this case means restoring their grandeur with the annexation of Crimea, showing Russia can flex its muscle and be a superpower. But change doesn't mean the same thing if you're in the country or in the regions, or if you're in one of the big cities like here in Moscow.
Well, if you ask directly what people want, first of all, they say they want social change. Higher salaries, higher pensions, lower prices, that's what people want, and the majority, which are still not very well off, who are dependent on the state, they want the state to take care of them. So that's what the majority want. Though of course the groups who want democracy, who want more freedom, but the percentage of them is not very big. The majority is still dependent on the state and want social benefits, first of all.
They want social benefits. They're not interested in democracy?
No, well, partly I would say one half of population say we are in a democracy, and here in Russia is more democracy than in the United States. But what really democracy is, that we are as normal as other countries. Because if you got deeper into, some deeper questions, for example, when we ask directly about the accountability of the government, well, the majority say the government is not accountable, but still we are a democracy, which means that we are as good country as any other country.
Were you surprised, because you did this big survey, you went all around the country, were you surprised at the findings, and as a result of that survey, the results of this election Sunday is what you were expecting?
Yeah, when you study sociology and public opinion for a long time, there are not many things that you can be surprised with, and with the results of Putin got on Sunday, it was obvious for many months and even years, and I may say so that the results was set by Crimea, when Putin got new legitimacy after a kind of a crisis in 11 and 12, when there were protests against him, when 40% of population was saying, well, he's not good at being president, and one half of people were saying we would better have a new face, but as there was no alternative, still they voted for Putin. But after Crimea, it changed, and Putin got new legitimacy because it was understood that the country is great again. And, well, we had it, and he maintained this level of popularity for several years. And
so that was 4 years ago, and it's
4 years ago,
and it still was a factor in the election on Sunday.
Not Crimea itself, but this new legitimacy that Putin got out of it.
So is it legitimacy, or is it us versus them?
Well, it's both. Well, it's both, because it's one of the sources of this legitimacy. Because Putin, as people say, he's good at defending Russia's interests. He just tough with the West, and as people say, they don't understand other language.
All right.
And, yeah.
So something like the Russia spy scandal, is that peripheral in that us versus them? Is that something that would have incited people in the final days to come out and vote, or is it just a side issue?
Well, my idea is it's one of the sources of legitimacy, but it was not the main one. And I think the main one why people came and voted, because they thought that it was their duty to come and vote. They were reminded of their duty, and they come and voted. And as well, the popularity of Putin after Crimea was high, it just was well, we saw the realization of this popularity on Sunday.
So the recipe is to show national pride. Is that how you keep it going now for another 6 years? Just by on these foreign policy issues, on restoring Russia's place as a superpower on the world stage? What about domestically? Aren't there domestic issues that matter?
Yeah, what I was saying that it was only one of the sources, yes, and I think as important and maybe more important now is the domestic issues, because in 2-3 years, people were growing tired of international agenda, and more people were saying, so let's stop helping anyone, everyone around us, and let's help ourselves. Let's spend more in Russia, not outside of Russia. And I think the government got this this message, and from the public opinion polls, and during the campaign some rise of pensions was introduced, rise of salaries was introduced, new social benefits, maternal capital was also introduced in December, just to show that the government do care about people, that we take care of you, come and vote.
All right, so rise is there, but that's not really reform, is it?
No, but it's not a reform, but maybe it's this kind of reform that the majority would welcome. So it's not reform, because when you often on TV talk about reform, it's about more market economy, less state and so on, but ordinary people do not go into such details. They don't understand much about what should be done. They want the result delivered.
Well, one final question. We had Daria on earlier, explain to us her generation. They're not as much watching state television. They're more on the internet. How's that going to change politics over the next 6 years?
That's a good question, because right now this young generation really it's in the internet, but they generally they're not interested in politics. What young people interested in, relationships, music, movies, and older generations are more dependent on TV. Yes, so in 6 years it can be some shift, because those people who can check some things which are not on TV, they will be more interested in politics. It can change something, but I don't expect much change. So I think the change can be in some other places, because the government, the state is also adapting to the new situation. And I think maybe one of the reasons why Putin's regime was so successful so far, its ability to adapt to a new situation, to crisis, to political crisis, to economic situation, just to come up with new things.
All right, Denis Volkov, many thanks to Denis Volkov of the Levada Center, drawing for us that contrast between 2012, where there were protests around the election, and of course in the interim, the annexation of Crimea, and today we're seeing much less of that protest, much less dissent which is harder to hear, and where there seems to be less tolerance for it. Again, it's a report by our correspondents Elena Volichin and Thomas Lowe.
It's a bone-chilling minus 20 degrees on this bridge next to the Kremlin, where Grigory Saksanov stands guard. He's one of the volunteers who, after the assassination of opposition figure Boris Nemtsov 3 years ago, watch over this improvised memorial 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
For us, the weather isn't the toughest part. The worst is the hatred some people show. They urinate, they spit, they insult us, they break our bones, and even hit the women.
Last year, after yet another attack, one of these volunteers died from his wounds. A victim of the climate of hate towards the opposition, fed by Kremlin-controlled TV channels. Dmitry Skorobutovs was the editor-in-chief of news on state TV channel Russia for 15 years. Management would send him these documents each night.
We call it the stop list. It's a list of topics, people or events that we're not allowed to cover on the news. All social movements and all expressions of discontent regarding the authorities are taboo for state television.
NGOs who fight for human rights, like Memorial, have been labelled foreign agents by the state and are dragged through the dirt by the media.
On state television, authorities continually hammer home to the public that we are the enemy, that we're dangerous and need to be fought against.
Alexei Polakhovich spent more than 3 years in a penal colony for taking part in a protest against the re-election of Vladimir Putin in 2012.
So many people were arrested, and then came a harsh reaction from the courts. Some 40 people were prosecuted. It was a first in Vladimir Putin's Russia.
It sent a message, and now those who oppose Vladimir Putin know the risks. And they don't expect his re-election to spark a wave of protests like it did 6 years ago.
Yeah, harder for dissent to be heard in 2018. With us is Alexander Solovyev. He is the chair of Open Russia, a civic rights group. Thank you for being with us here on this frosty night in Moscow.
Yeah, it's quite cold, so sorry for freezing here.
Okay, so if even the Russians are cold, then that's okay. Let me ask you, in that report, they said, look, there's not going to be, that report was filmed before the result was final, predicting there wasn't going to be big dissent after the election, and the prediction turned out true. It's not like 2012. Why is that?
Well, I think because everybody knew how's that gonna finish. I mean, it was not a surprise for anyone. Actually, I'm surprised with the fact that a lot of people are surprised. How did that finish? I mean, we knew that this whole spectacular show was aimed on only one goal, just to make, not to re-elect even, just to make Putin, to name him president again. So it was, I cannot even say that it was election. Well, according to the information from the polls, there were not that much in Moscow, for instance. There were not that much, sorry for that word, stupid frauds when people were, putting the ballots into the box. There were not that much, these frauds, but the frauds became more sophisticated. So people just were coming to the stations and they were saying honestly that we should where can I make selfie? Because I'm obliged to make selfie just to justify the fact that I was here. And I was like, who obliged you? And they said, well, my boss said. and everyone were working, you know, in a budget sphere. So they were just bringing their people who somehow depend on the budget, and their salaries depend on the budget. And well, unfortunately, they made this high turnout, and Central Election Committee has been trying to attract as much attention to the elections. Well, it never happened in Russian history. Although that's normal for Central Election Committee, but not normal when it behaves different way in the different elections. Some of the elections are being, you know, silent. Some of the elections are being attracted attention. So I personally cannot call these elections because it was not fair. I mean, the whole procedure.
Are Russians losing interest in politics?
Well, of course they are, because the whole machine, the whole state machine, is making them losing some kind of interest. From the one hand, they are. I mean, the state machine wants people keep going to the polls and voting for the regime, for Putin, personally. But from the other hand, they are, you know, they are spreading this idea, this stereotype that nothing depends on you guys. We know better. You know, that you don't have alternative. Look at the other candidates.
So let me ask you then, Vladimir Putin, he's been in power for 18 years. He's in his 60s now. Officially, this is his final term in office. Is this his final term?
Well, we cannot predict that, because he has been promising us that he's not going to go for
He said that I'm not going to stick around till I'm 100, he said at the last night.
In 2004, he said that he's not going to go for the third term. But as we may see, it's his fourth term, to be honest. I mean, he's lying, and he doesn't care about that, because nothing happens to him. I mean, the whole machine, I mean, the state propaganda will do everything to make him, you know, a good guy. So he doesn't care about lying, and we cannot predict whether it was true or not. So he may say everything he wants. He knows that no responsibility will come for him.
Alexander Solovyev, so tell us about what you do. What does Open Russia do?
We have a civic movement here, a Russian movement. We're aimed on human rights protecting, and we are aimed on teaching people public policy on different topics such as municipal policy, you know, this lower level of politics, and we're trying to spread the truthful information. We're not saying that we must immediately fight Putin personally. We're just saying that, listen, we've got a lot of problems in Russia, a lot. And this is not normal when one and the same man is in power for 18 years. This is just not normal, even if you love him. So we have a lot of problems, and most of them cannot be solved because they mean that we should restore the economy, for instance, or well, all that kind of stuff, and we should get rid of this corruptionists in power, and a lot of them are.
Okay, so the candidate in the election that was talking about, you know, rule of law, open society, this kind of thing, Ksenia Sobchak, she polled less than 2%. The one who finished second in the polling, who finished in double digits, Pavel Grudinin, was the Communist Party standard bearer. Who's the leader of the opposition after this election?
Well, to be honest, opposition is... Well, we don't have a solid opposition in Russia because the field is being cleared by the state, by the so-called Siloviki, by the executive power. So when we hear the critics toward against Russian opposition, we must clearly understand that, well, it's not quite easy to be in opposition in Russia.
I'll put the question differently. Why did people go and vote for Pavel Grudinin?
Because communist ideas are quite widespread in Russia. Considering the past of our country, we missed the moment in 1991 when we should have condemned the communist regime, the totalitarian regime. So people are now, feeling some kind of nostalgia for the communist regime. They do not remember the horribles, the horrible thing about this regime. They just think that, well, we should restore, we need our Stalin or something like that. Unfortunately, you always have somebody in your society who demands an iron hand, so. well, that's. I cannot say that this is a disaster. You will always have leftists in your society. You will always have centrists, but state propaganda just lets somebody who more or less okay for the state to be a candidate from the communists, to be a candidate from social democrats or something like that. So of course, well, opposition looks in comparison with Putin not okay. But as long as you show opposition as not serious, as, well, for instance, being compared with such, sorry for this word, clown as Zhirinovsky or something like...
Ultranationalist.
Yes, being compared with him, you will always look okay. I mean, for instance, Vladimir Putin and Zhirinovsky. Of course, when you compare such, such politics, you would say, well, Putin is better, for sure. And Putin is making everything just not to have any alternative. A lot of people think that, well, if not Putin, then who's else? But actually, they do everything just not to have alternative. Of course, when you do not have alternative, you will vote and you will go and vote for Putin. The massive propaganda is quite powerful. It's extremely powerful in Russia. Even absolutely honest people go to vote for Putin just because they don't have alternative and they believe this stereotype.
Or they want stability, like our first guest was saying.
Well, a lot of people want stability, but actually our stability is being, colored in different colors. It's not quite real stability. Well, stability may be negative stability or positive stability. So propaganda says that this is stability, but this is not actually.
All right, Alexander Solovyev, many thanks for joining us. Best of luck.
Thank you very much.
All right, and we've been talking about the domestic challenges over the next 6 years. Vladimir Putin, again, as we've been saying throughout this program, weighing a lot on about Russia's place on the world stage particularly. Let's listen to some of what he had to say just down there where they're taking down right now the stage from last night's victory celebration.
It's very important to retain this unity, my dear friends, and to note that yes, there are others who voted for other candidates, but to move forward in unity, we must do so with all the citizens of our country. We won't build our hopes on questions of a daily context. We must look to the future of our great motherland strategically, to the future of our children, without conditions, without limits for success. Yes. Thank you so much. It's together that we will carry out this huge, wide-scale work in the name of Russia. Thank you.
And to comment on the words of Vladimir Putin, we're joined by, well, it's an honor to be joined by Vladimir Posner. He was somebody who, when I was growing up, explained the Soviet Union to a lot of people in the United States, for instance. A journalist, still the host of Posner on Russia One. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Well, before we talk about the bigger picture, just what does Vladimir Putin mean when he talks about looking at the future strategically?
He's hitting the right buttons. It sounds great. It means that there is a strategy for the future, that something's going to happen, something important for the country, for the people. It doesn't really matter.
We Russians have to think about.
Well, it means everybody, all of us together. He's calling for a collective effort. He's saying, we have to do this. We have to put our shoulder to the wheel and get this thing moving. We have important things to do. That's basically what he's saying. And of course, those are words that anyone can kind of accept.
And what is that strategy?
I haven't got the slightest idea, quite frankly. I think, on the one hand, of course, he does have the support of a great number of Russians because he gave them back their sense of pride, which they had lost for a while. But that's going to last for how long can that last? Now there's the economy, which is faltering, not doing well at all. People are living less well than they were living 10 years ago in sense of standard of living. That's gone down. So it's got to get some real change. Probably there's going to be a change in government. I wouldn't be surprised if there's going to be a new prime minister. When Putin says that we have to do something very important, I think he's telling everybody we've got to work very hard.
He's already cleared out in the 6 months preceding the election some of the cabinet, some of the members of the staff who'd been there a long time, replacing him with younger technocrats.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, I think simply because they don't know, the older people really don't know how to deal with the situation. And there's an interesting point here, and that is that the leadership of this country is all Soviet. People born in the Soviet Union went to Soviet schools, were members of the Young Communist League. They are, if you will, products of a system that no longer exists. And they're in a new system now. And they don't really know how to deal with it. And gradually he's replacing them with people who were not born in Soviet times or who were just kids when it was, when they're 8, 9 years old. I interviewed one of them who's what's called here the Minister of Economic Development, 35 years old. Very different people. Not ideological at all. It's all about facts. It's about bolts and nails and what have you. And he wants that kind of person who really knows what they're talking about, know what a market economy is about, and know how to deal with that. And gradually you're going to see more and more younger people moving in, which is, in my opinion, the only hope for this country anyway.
Because this is the fascinating thing when you walk around Moscow, is that it is a European country.
Absolutely. Well, look, when you read Russian literature, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, Chekhov, when you listen to Russian music, Tchaikovsky, Rachmaninoff, that's all European. It's not Asian. This is a European country, basically, with certain overtones, if you will, that come from Byzantium.
Right. And the other difference is that right now in China, they've got what they call the Great Firewall of China. They can keep out the West that way.
Yes.
Here, we had Daria on earlier saying, she's on the internet, she's in touch, she speaks perfect English. Yeah. The younger generation, they're not impermeable to what's going on in the rest of the world.
Not at all. As a matter of fact, that generation, the younger generation, has grown up watching American movies, American serials on television, having the internet, being on YouTube, traveling. It's no longer a problem. Now the problem is only getting a visa from the country you're going to. But it used to be you had to get a Soviet visa to get out of here. So they're completely different. They're different, and they are very much like everyone else.
And yet they still voted for Vladimir Putin.
Well, of course, who else would they vote for? Look at all right, Navalny, who was attractive to a lot of young people, was not allowed to run. Whether on trumped-up charges or not, but he was not allowed to run. So who do you go for? Well, there's Ksenia Sobchak, who's a young lady and not very well known. And do you really think she should be president of this country? And you do have Putin, and a lot of people trust him because of what he's done. So, or they haven't voted at all, and not a few have not voted. In Moscow, you had, 52% turnout. It's not that great, For the country, 67. But for cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg, in the low 50s. So that also says something about, who didn't vote and why didn't they vote.
Looking ahead, just one final question, which is that you look at right now this us versus them mentality. It's appearing again with the diplomatic standoff with Great Britain over the poisoning of the former double agent and his daughter.
Yeah.
Is it galvanizing people, or are they indifferent to it?
It is galvanizing people. I think that whole story actually galvanized a lot of people to go vote for Putin because of the way this thing has been handled. The tone of Prime Minister May, the ultimatum, if you don't talk to us tomorrow, then we're going to do da-da-da, we're going to go this and that. The Minister of Defense of Great Britain saying Russia should shut up and go away. People here react to that in the opposite way. And I think any people would. You can't talk to a country like that. And if you want cooperation, you have to say, okay, you want samples of this nerve gas? We'll give you samples and prove to us that it's not yours. You don't just say, shut up and go away. Or you get this reaction that you now have in Russia, which is very anti-Western, and it's really too bad.
The standoff, it's all just going to die down? The standoff with Great Britain, the standoff over Ukraine, the standoff over Syria?
I don't know whether it's going to just die down. I spoke to the former Secretary of Defense of the United States recently, who was Secretary of Defense under Clinton, Bill Perry, and he says that the danger of a nuclear exchange is a reality today because of the lack of trust And therefore, the fear if you get even a false message, you're prone to push the button because you can't talk to these people anymore. It's dangerous. We're in a dangerous situation. And there's a lack of statesmanship on all sides. A lack of people, of a statesman getting up and saying, look, enough. Let's sit down and talk about this. The world is in a difficult situation. And that's not happening.
All right, so we have this Cold War-style standoff.
Yes.
But you also have the Internet, so it's not the Cold War.
Well, the Cold War was ideological. This is not ideological. This is different. So in that, it's not
the
Cold
War.
Well, it's a difference of interests, of geopolitical interests. It's also Russia wanting to stand up for itself and to be considered a great nation, as it always considered itself to be, and not a second-rate, losing Cold War, not interested, and so on. That's what's going on. And I don't know if you're aware of something called the Paul Wolfowitz Doctrine, which was adopted in 1992 in the United States, basically aimed at keeping Russia down. Well, that backfired.
All right, and Russia's not down. We're going to see, of course, how the next 6 years evolve. Vladimir Posner, many thanks for joining us on France 24.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for joining us here for this special edition from Moscow. I want to thank all of our team, our correspondents for those reports that you saw. Stay with us because there's more coverage coming up.